Our land use, whether that's poor planning or intensive agriculture, is destroying habitats and the food chain for so much wildlife. And now, wildlife has a whole new suite of problems to contend with. A recent European study has found that climate change is exacerbating existing threats to wild birds, with implications for even the hardiest and most common birds we all know. At Loch Hyne, near Skibbereen, I'm meeting the only Irish author of a newly released European meta-study into the growing impact of climate change on bird life.
One of the major types of biological responses we're seeing to climate change is changes in the seasonal timing of key life cycle events. You know, if you think about a place like Ireland, it's a temperate country where we have, a distinct difference between summer and winter, although you wouldn't always know it. The springtime is a key transition period there, and then there's a sort of a pulse in biological activity. And so the birds then that might be feeding on these insects or different invertebrates, they might be feeding their chicks. They're trying to time when they breed to sort of maximise the overlap with this seasonal pulse in food.
Okay.
With climate change, what we're seeing is that this seasonal peak in, for example, caterpillar abundance has been getting earlier and earlier in the year. So when it's warmer, they just develop faster, they hatch earlier. So the birds are trying to change when they breed, essentially, to track these changes in their food supply. But the problem is, there are limits on the rate at which populations can adapt in this evolutionary sense.
Because that's something that happens generation by generation, and that takes quite a long time, I imagine.
So if you take, for example, blue tits or grey tits, which are common birds in Ireland, they have a generation time of about 2 years. So that means that in 20 years of climate change, they've gone through 10 generations. Each generation, there might be a small evolutionary change, and that'll accrue across many generations, whereas in common guillemots, they would have a generation time on the order of 15 to 20 years. 20 years worth of climate change is just one and a bit generation for them.
Okay.
So they're going to be slower to evolve in that sense.
So they're going to be caught out by these changes. They're not going to be able to adapt quickly enough.
Many birds have the capacity for this as well, but again, there's limits there. They have to cue into changes in their environment, and they might get it wrong. It seems that there's going to be a strongly elevated risk of extinction in the coming decades and centuries, meaning that many bird populations and species potentially could go extinct in the future if climate change continues apace.
Is there anything we can do about this in terms of helping our birds to adapt?
Yeah, so it's really just simple things that we know from conservation biology, such as maintaining healthy habitats, well interconnected habitats. So if birds need to move, if they need to shift their ranges, they have to be able to move from A to B to disperse. And so we need to maintain healthy ecological corridors, for example, for different species.
The growing threat of climate change is yet another reason why the protection and preservation of habitats is so crucial. And with so much of Ireland's land used for agriculture, lots of wildlife depend on farmland habitats. Yet all over Ireland, farmland that was once rich in birds and biodiversity has become less and less hospitable for wildlife. Birds that were once widespread and familiar to every rural dweller are now barely hanging on. This is something Roscommon farmer Curlew Corncrake understands instinctively. For years, Curlew has worked tirelessly trying to restore the wetlands on his farm so that they have some chance of retaining the wealth of birdlife here. All within the strict confines of a special area of conservation on the shores of Loch Ree.
It was an obstacle, but it was one that we were very fortunate that some of the people in the National Parks and Wildlife Service was very amenable to a restoration of a wetlands. So we set about putting it back to what it was.
Our agricultural policies have until now rewarded farmers for draining and reclaiming land, for making every corner eligible for agricultural use. And so wetlands like these were drained away and reclaimed as fields for cattle. But Curlew's love of nature sees more value in letting these wetlands flood naturally, helping to combat looming extinctions for some species. And it's not just wetlands Porrig fights to preserve.
This is what sustains the bird life here. You have your habitat, you have your shelter, you have your nesting site, you have your food, you have the nectar in it, you have your wildflower in it.
His farm is rich in wonderful meadows and native woodlands.
This is just lovely.
Yep, oh, it's a beautiful area, but it is the centre of the woodland, and it's one of the areas you see all the probing where the woodcock have been feeding, because it's very rich in the worms and what they need.
So there's woodcock in here because it's wet woodland. This is what they like.
It's just the perfect habitats for them.
Even the old ruins provide homes for barn owls and kestrels.
This is where you've got then the kestrels and the barn owls.
Yeah, this is their habitat, you know, the old built heritage.
And there's no problem with the kestrels and the barn owls being in the same building together?
They're happy as could be. No, yeah, there's no problem at all. The kestrels out in the day and the barn owls out at night, so it's a good combination.
Are you getting enough support from the state in managing the land in the way that you are for wildlife?
There's no help and there's no recognition of the importance of the wetlands and the difficulty with it. Hence, that's why the abandonment of them is taking place. And there's a direct relation between the abandonment of your wetlands and the decline of your species.
Do you think there's more that the support schemes like the Common Agricultural Policy could do to support landowners that are working with nature?
Farmers work to the guidelines and the rules that's set down. But the biggest negativity and has changed the countryside the most is land eligibility. Now there's 15 acres of ancient woodland here behind you that is as rich of a habitat as you'll get in any country. And that has not got one single cent from anyone for anything. If I went and took it out and put it back into grass, it would then become eligible. All this could have been saved. We're talking about biodiversity. It's 15 years dripping off our lips now. Have the bio on the farm, and that will create link corridors farm to farm to farm, and that will spread out the habitats. And there is an aesthetics to all this as well. You know, there's public goods. There's people that come to this country not to see just sheep or cattle or cows. They come to see the 40 shades of green, you know. And we're getting very close to the wood shade of green the way we're going, you know, and it's sad.
Our agricultural policies have to be far better at enabling positive action to combat the biodiversity and climate crises. Worldwide, we've lost 85% of our wetlands, which is one of the reasons why Porrig is doing all he can to ensure that these wetlands are as rich in bird life in the future as they were in the past. We are losing species at about 1,000 times the natural rate. This is the 6th mass extinction. By the end of the century, we will have seen the loss of about 1 million species. If we allow these declines to continue, we risk losing some of nature's most wondrous sights and sounds. There are some natural phenomena you have to travel the world to see.
And there are some wonders of nature right here in our own backyard. Sound and the sight of thousands of starlings swooshing through the sky is absolutely awe-inspiring. Imagine if wonders like this were lost forever. But the good news is, we don't have to. We have the people, we have the knowledge, we know what needs to be done. All that's left now is to take action.